So now we already know more about unemployment and more about inflation and GDP growth. So what we've talked about and what we've learned is that when economy is growing fast, it could be good and bad. Economy growing fast means that we have low unemployment rate and pretty high inflation. Why is that happening? Economy is growing fast, we are producing a lot. To produce a lot, we need to hire more workers, so the unemployment rate is pretty low. At the same time, what happens is that residents receive some income, a lot of income. The income is increasing as more people having jobs. Some people start demanding higher wages because the economy is doing so good and they have to work more. So as a result, with higher demand, prices start going up. So what we end up with is higher inflation. So it could be good and it's also bad. Good is because we have low unemployment rate. Bad is because inflation is picking up and probably is much higher than what we want it to be. When economy is growing too slow or not growing at all, it's also not very good. So even though we have low inflation, people enjoy temporarily reduction of prices or maybe steady prices. We kind of like that because it allows us to buy more goods and services. At the same time, we're most likely going to have high unemployment rate. When we're not producing a lot, we're not demanding goods, we don't need to hire workers. So some of the workers may be laid off. As a result, we get high unemployment rate. At the same time, there's no more income to go around. We're not demanding goods and services when we don't have jobs. As a result, prices may actually start decreasing or at least not to increase for a certain period of time. So once again, it's mostly not good, but it's okay because we have low inflation. So what is about right? Ideally, we want to see economic growth to be about 3 to 4%. That's what we call about right. Inflation should be slightly lower than that, about 1 to 2%, and unemployment rate, which is equivalent to the natural unemployment rate, close to 4 to 5%. So right now we're not growing as fast. We're probably growing close to 2.5%. We probably have about right inflation, and our unemployment rate is higher than natural unemployment rate. Right now the unemployment rate is close to 6.7%. So the next natural question is, well, we don't really see a lot of this about right economic standing. So sometimes we're either growing too fast, which we haven't seen in a while, or we are growing too slow. So the question is, should we help to speed up the economic recovery, or should we help economy to slow down a little bit when we're dealing with high inflation? Well, classical economic theory tells us that if left alone, economy will recover on its own in the long run. It's an important addition to this statement. The problem with the long run is that in the long run, we are all dead. If you don't know who made this statement, I'm going to tell you. The statement came from John Keynes, who proposed this theory that we not necessarily have to wait for economy to recover on its own. It will recover on its own, but in the long run. In the long run, we may not necessarily live to see that time when the economy recovers itself, so we may actually use some policy to help stimulate economic growth or vice versa to slow down very fast growing economy. So what he argued is that recessions and depressions can result from an inadequate demand, and policymakers should change GDP by changing public and private demand for goods and services. So this policymakers, our government, has this ability to change gross domestic product, to change economic growth, to help it out by changing demand for goods and services. So let's look what tools our government has in order to help economy recover in much shorter run, in much shorter period of time. So one of the government tools is what we call fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is when government changes taxes or adjusts spending. If you think back about GDP, we said GDP has four components: consumer spending, investment, uh, net exports, and government spending. That's the one I forgot about. Consumer spending, investment, government spending, and net exports. So by changing taxes or adjusting spending, government can change our GDP growth. So when we have an economic boom, economy is growing way too fast. We can reduce government spending or we can increase taxes. When people have to pay higher taxes, they're not going to spend as much. As a result, we are reducing the private demand and prices may start decreasing. So why do we need to slow down economic boom? Once again, it's a situation in which we have very low unemployment rate, which is good, but at the same time we have pretty high inflationary processes, which is not good. So in that case, decrease government spending and increase taxes will help economy to recover. In the case to slow down a little bit. In the case of the recession, which is a slow economic growth, that's a situation in which we have high unemployment rate and very low inflation. So people actually like low prices, but at the same time, we're worried about high unemployment rate. Government can increase spending, such as start building new roads, start building new schools, right? So that's what we call government spending. You give people jobs through building some kind of infrastructure. Or government can decrease taxes. By decreasing taxes, we change in private demand, meaning that people now have more of the disposable income, so they're able to spend more money on goods and services. So we're increasing consumption spending by our population. So in 2009, the stimulus bill actually used both of these factors. First of all, we increased government spending by $500 billion, and there was about $300 billion cut in taxes, either to middle class or corporation, but total estimated was a tax cut was close to $300 billion. Now the natural question is to think, well, if we are decreasing spending and increasing taxes, that will allow us to actually help out the budget deficit. By decreasing spending and increasing taxes, we are reducing spending, increasing the revenue, and we can help our budget deficit. That's great, but we have to remember that when our economy is in recession, that's what we were experiencing from 2008, right? We needed the opposite kind of policy. Yes, we were concerned with really high debt, we were concerned with our large budget deficit. But in order for the government to help our economy to recover faster, we had to increase spending and decrease taxes. As we saw, the economy started recovering a little bit faster, but at the same time, it added a lot to our national debt. So this fiscal policy is pretty tricky. On one hand, we just saw that with appropriate fiscal policy, in the case of the recession, even though we can help economy to recover, at the same time we're going to hurt our national debt because we increase spending and decrease our revenue. There's other reason for which this policy may not necessarily work. So it may not be a good or great answer to a recession because if some requirements are not satisfied, this policy can do more bad than good. There's 3 requirements for the successful fiscal policy. First of all, this policy has to be timely. President and the Congress has to come up with an agreement and they have to agree on specifics of this policy. It has to be implemented in the right time and it has to have timely effect. So it has to kick in right away. If one of these requirements is not satisfied, we may actually be too late in a way that the economy may start recovering on its own by the time we agree on all of those things, especially given our current situation, how our president agrees with the Congress. It could be pretty difficult for them to come up with the timely agreement, implementation, and for the policy to take timely effect. We also may want to make sure that this policy is temporary. So it's only dealing with the recession, and once the economy recovers, then we're going to go back into the previous situation. Because if we keep helping economy to recover, and economy already recovered, we may start the opposite process. We may start growing economy too fast. And once again, it's not bad for the unemployment, but it's going to be pretty bad when it comes to the inflationary process. And also, these policies have to be targeted. So it has to hit the right areas of the economy, not just overall kind of let's try to throw money anywhere we possibly can. But we have to make sure that that money actually going into the areas that will help to speed up the economy as fast as possible. There is another way for our government to deal with recessions or to deal with very fast economic growth. And that's what we call monetary policy. And monetary policy will refer to the actions undertaken by Federal Reserve, specifically raising and lowering interest rates. And that's what's going to be discussed in the next classes, in the next lectures that are going to follow.